Hi, everyone. Stephanie here. So, people talk a lot about the research to practice gap and how we can close that gap and bring what's known in the reading research into the classroom to help support teachers and students. There are several reasons for that gap, I think. One is teachers don't have good training in their pre service education to know what is already existing in the reading research, and they're not really trained how to read research, how to be a consumer of research. In addition, there is a real difficulty getting a hold of research. Lots of research publications are behind what people call a paywall. You have to buy a journal to get access to what's inside it. And that's a real barrier to educators being able to access reading research. And then I think finally, there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about what constitutes research. Sometimes teachers are led to believe that anything that's in print is research, and that's not the case. And that's really what I wanted to focus a little bit on today, is showing some examples of different kinds of print publications and contrasting those with what you should see in a journal article that's actually summarizing scientific experimental research. So let's give this a try and see what we can come up with here. So I have an example here from a blog that's a publication you might see on somebody's website. This one is from the Right to Read project, and blogs typically might summarize research or mention research, but they are not typically a place to find research. So although it is in print, it's typically someone's opinion or at best a summary of research. Here's an example of another kind of publication. This is, I believe, from the Reading Teacher, which is a publication of the International Literacy Association. This is not research, this is an opinion piece. So just because something's in print, just because it's printed in a journal, doesn't mean that it's research. This is an example of a publication from the American Federation of Teachers. This is the American Educator by Joe Torgeson, where he is summarizing reading research. He is not talking about his own research study in this particular publication, but he's providing an overall summary of lots of different studies and drawing some conclusions, his own conclusions about that. You can also sometimes see those kinds of conclusions in books. This is an example from David Kilpatrick's Essentials book, where he is drawing his own conclusions from reading research. So it wouldn't be accurate to say that this is Kilpatrick's research. This is his summary and interpretation of research. And you would want to go to these actual references that are cited here and read those studies yourself. Here's an example of a research study that's summarized in a journal. So you want to be looking for journals that are peer reviewed, that include information about how studies are reviewed and what the role of the editorial board is for that journal. And in an actual journal article like this one, you would see a review of the literature at the beginning. So this is setting up the reason why they needed to conduct the study. This is summarizing what's already known about this topic, and it would conclude with the research questions. And so this is where you're first getting a glimpse of the kind of study that should be coming up, whether that's qualitative or quantitative. The selection of the methods should depend on the questions that are being asked. So the methods section is what follows, and here's where you're going to see information about the sample, the students who were involved in the study. So you want to pay attention here to the size of the sample, how many students, what the characteristics of those students were. If they are similar to your students in your classroom, that's going to be the most close match, so that you can generalize the results of this study to your own students. In the methods section, you're also going to see a description of the procedures that were used in the research. And this should be in enough detail that you would be able to replicate those procedures, because that's what we want over time. We want other researchers to be able to replicate the study and see if they come to the same conclusions. You'll also see in the methods the assessments that were used. What kinds of measures of student performance were included? Were those reliable and valid assessments? And how were the procedures deployed? What kinds of controls were placed on the environment, on the teaching conditions, and so forth? And then you would expect to see the results. And this is where you'll find the statistics of what happened, where you can see if the procedures that were put in place caused changes, and were they meaningful changes in the students before they received this procedure or instructional approach, and after, and how those outcomes compare to students who didn't receive those procedures or that teaching. So that's the results, and it's typically followed by some type of discussion. Here you would see the conclusions that the authors of the study are drawing, and also limitations of the study, and that's important as well. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of uh, an overview of the types of publications that you might see in print, and a little bit of buyer beware in terms of helping you to discern what is actually a publication that's sharing research. You're not going to be able to find research to answer every question you have about your students. Every possible outcome can't be proven by research. So these are things to be aware of when you are starting to learn a little bit more about the science of reading.